Fantastic. Okay. Welcome everyone. Varmt välkomna till RaizUp Sweden's first panel discussion. Just hang on a second. We just make sure that everybody is on mute if you are not talking. Okay, we've got our first panel discussion today on leadership and growth mindset. My name is Marjorie Sundstrom and I'm the co-chapter leader of RaizUp Sweden together with the lovely Evelyn Hamilton, who is here today as well. For those of you who don't know, RaizUp is a global community for hospitality and travel tech industry. It's a personalized career platform where members aim to inspire, empower, and elevate one another. Evelyn and I just met earlier this year to open RaizUp, the RaizUp community here in Sweden. And what we wanted to do is bring our industry closer together, highlight great people, and retain talent, especially in these difficult times. So today we have an amazing panel, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have Monika Hilm, who is a managing director at Yasuragi, Japanese Spa and Conference Hotel. Kerstin Öhman, who is owner and CEO at Business Service Club Events and BSC Travel. Then we have Chris Crowley, who is Senior Vice President Global Sales at Duetto in the UK. And then we have Mr. Hipshake, Erik Eklund, who is Human Connection Specialist. Today, we are going to dive deeper into the topic of Swedish leadership, both in theory and in practice. And then we are going to look at the growth mindset that is needed for throughout the crisis that we're certainly not through yet at the moment, even though we do see green shoots ahead of us, and most importantly, how we can use this mindset to bring the industry forward. So we hope that you're going to be inspired by the event, and if you can find out more about RaizUp on weRaizUp.com. So I'll hand you over to Evelyn, who will go through some housekeeping for today.
Hello everybody. So I have muted everyone by default, so we won't be disrupted by any latecomers. But when you do want to talk, just click on the microphone icon in the bottom bar to mute or unmute yourself. You can also choose to have your camera on and off. However, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and that helps minimize the presenting underwater sound and interruptions from any barking dogs. When the panel is talking, please write in the chat box and let me know if you can't hear or see something. And you're welcome to use the chat box throughout the whole panel today, and I'll keep track of the comments and come back to your questions at the end. Over to you, Marjorie.
Thanks, Evelyn. So we'll get started with just a quick round of introductions. I'm going to start with the person to my beside me here. Kerstin, do you want to start off and just introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Kerstin Öhman, and I'm the owner and right now the CEO of the event and travel agency Business Service Club. I have had my own company for 17 years now, and it's fun, but it's also very lonely sometimes with decisions. So there are good things and bad things, and I have done this several years now, so I've been with the good times and the bad times. And my philosophy is really simple: action, do something. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kerstin. And Monika.
Hi, I'm Monika Hilm. I'm currently managing director for Yasuragi outside Stockholm. It's a spa resort hotel. I returned to Sweden after 26 years abroad last summer. And during those 26 years, I worked in 3 different continents, always in hotels. I always seem to return to this industry. I keep leaving it and I keep on coming back. It's something about the industry that just keeps holding on to me. Kerstin was talking about her philosophy. My philosophy is summarized in my book that I wrote in 2017. Put your people first and the rest will follow. It's very simple. It's built on the theories that started already in the 50s in the airline industry in the US. And that is, if you prioritize your team members and you always keep their focus on them, the guests will be happier, the shareholders will be happier. So put all the focus on the people that works in your team and the rest will come. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Monika. And Chris?
So I've remembered to unmute this time. Hi, I'm Chris Crowley. I'm based in London, so not Swedish, I would like to say at this point. And I am the global sales leader for Duetto. We are the world's leading hotel revenue management platform with offices around the world. I have also, a little bit like Monika, been in the hotel industry, left the hotel industry, come back to the hotel industry. Makes it sound a bit like the mafia, doesn't it, Monika? But we are nonetheless back. And very happy to be back working again. I have a career that has spanned hotels, technology, consultancy, business travel, and entertainment travel over the last 30 years or so. And if I have a philosophy, it's probably the open learning philosophy, which is never stop learning about learning or thinking about thinking, and you'll be okay. My greatest achievement remains my two sons, George and Monty, who I'm delighted to tell you are not going to be joining us for this webinar today. Thanks.
That you know of.
That we know of, yes.
I am well away from my two little kids that could just pop up at any time if you're at home. Erik.
Hey everybody, I am the guy from well, the video, if I say so. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for hosting me here. I am super Swedish, as you can tell from my super Swedish look. My blonde hair, blue eyes are just screaming at you right now. And I am spending my time after a journey in hospitality, doing my own right now, where I am encouraging people to connect, build trusting relationships, to engage and lead from their heart in a sense of harmony with their mind, so that we can all come together and live a life that we're proud of. And I spend that time giving speeches, group coaching programs, individual coaching to all these remarkable humans around the world. And philosophy-wise, I think I'm living by something called like life happens between Buddha and Beyonce.
That's a great start there, Erik. You can see that we have just a fantastic panel today that is just going to, I hope, give some great perspective from really kind of wide, from both industries, from the UK and also from Sweden, from abroad. So I'm going to start off with diving straight into the topic of Swedish leadership. And Kerstin, I wanted to start with you, seeing as you're Swedish, based in Sweden, and I wanted to hear your perspective of leadership here in Sweden. What is Swedish leadership to you?
It's a little bit, it has two sides, because you have, I think we are kind of famous, not very positive maybe, but you have all the time, you have to check with the team. If you are a manager and you take a decision, and then you have to check with the team, is it okay? Does it feel okay? You know, it's hard to describe, but it's kind of a way that we work like here in Sweden. I don't say it's the best. I'm raised with this, and I'm sure with you people who have worked all over the world can tell more about the difference between the different leadership styles. But then I know also Sweden is very successful, maybe because of this leader management style, so to say. So it's double. You have to be the manager, you have to take decisions, and you also have to be very good at having the team with you. That's the Swedish style.
feel free to hop in, guys. What is your perspective of the Swedish?
If I can add, Marjorie, since I returned last summer, listening to Kerstin, I'm smiling because this is what I've been saying all these years abroad. And then I came back and I realized it's a little bit different here than I perceived it to be. I think it's very interesting that once everyone in Sweden agrees, they run in the same direction and it goes faster. So even if the early stages are maybe slower, in the long run, it actually ends up going faster, which is what I've always tried to take with me when I'm out in other countries. I think one point that strikes me, and I'm not really sure if it's only Swedish leadership, I think it's quite general, but it's very obvious here, is that we like to avoid conflicts. I think this is something that I personally really like. I like conflicts because I think even if it's a conflict with a guest or with a team member, most of the time, if you handle it and do something with it, actually you can turn it into a much better relationship. But I think this is quite typical, but I'm not going to say that it's purely Swedish because I think it's pretty much everywhere. And then the other thing I've noticed since I come back here is that we work in a slightly slower pace. We want to take it step by step to think through all the ideas and maybe not running so fast, which is something I'm slowly learning to adjust to. And there are many advantages to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to comment too much on Swedish leadership because, as you can tell, I'm clearly not Swedish nor based in Sweden. But my experience of your part of the world in general is that you live in a culture of consensus-based decision making. So you tend to build consensus before you make a decision. Unlike the more US-style command and control organizations where decisions are taken and then everybody spends time arguing about what the decisions mean and how to implement them, you guys like to talk more and build your consensus first, and then once the decision is taken, it tends to move quite quickly, whatever you're doing, because you've already dealt with some of the issues before you've got to the main thrust of the conversation, I think. So I think it's a consensus-based model. It's a very attractive model to work in because it realizes everybody's perspective. It's very inclusive, but it can be frustrating because it's not necessarily always very fast, which I think is what you were talking about, Monika. You sometimes want to take a much quicker decision than wait for the consensus to build around the perspective. But yeah, just my outside impression.
Exactly. I can definitely, I do remember also being in hotel school in Ireland and learning about the Swedish style. People often look to Sweden as an example for leadership and for many different things. But I often think that now that I live in Sweden, that in practice, you can see the pros and cons of the Swedish leadership model. That yes, it is great that everybody is a team and everybody is on board, but it does take a long time. That sometimes we just have to sit down and have a fika, and sometimes that can be frustrating as an international perspective in Sweden. Monika, what do you think about that? You've just moved back to Sweden recently. How did you find that?
Well, first, just to comment on your fika, I have introduced fika in most places and hotels where I worked, where it's really been appreciated, where the manager comes with home-baked cakes or something, and it fosters connections. And I think this is where Erik would come in as well to comment on that. If we foster connections, we actually end up working faster together because we know each other. You build up an emotional deposit bank where if something goes wrong, you can take from it. And I think the concept of fika, yes, it's 15 minutes in the morning or 20 minutes where you can't reach people because they're off fika, but I think the long-term productivity should not be underestimated. And this is something I've tried to implement everywhere I go. But to go back to your question on what I've noticed since I come back, and not necessarily in Yasuragi, but in general, and I'm hearing from other people as well, that the American model that Chris was commenting on seems to have influenced quite a lot in the Swedish way of managing more and more, comparing to what I remember from 26 years ago. And this is interesting because the picture I have of Swedish leadership style, from what I remember, is not exactly what it is today. So I think the American model or other European models seems to have a bigger and greater influence on the Swedish system, comparing to what it had before. I find that a little bit concerning. I would like to see more of the consensus base that Kerstin was talking about, agree and go in the same direction, less hierarchic. That I'm a little bit, since I came back, it's still very early days, but I'm noticing more and more people have that kind of leadership. I had one management coach who told me, yeah, but it could be because there's so many American companies here, more people are going abroad doing internships, and then they come back with their what they have learned in other places. So I really hope that through this organization and others, to contain and to spread more the Swedish way, which I think is very effective.
Erik, what's your take on the Swedish leadership model?
I wouldn't say that I have a take on the Swedish leadership model. Yeah. I would, no, you have said it. You have said a lot about it. And if there's something that I would say that I'm just noticing in general, especially these days, is that the emotional leadership approach, as in showing emotions and personality and vulnerability and transparency. Let me say it frankly speaking, of the countries I'm with, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, France, struggle there. Everything is, I need to know, analytical, it needs to make sense, give me the facts, then I might buy into it. And I would say if there's something that we're going towards right now, it's definitely more of the, okay, where do our emotions come into play? Our leaders, what do we really want to see from our leaders? Only facts, figures, and numbers?
We were talking actually with Kerstin there backstage before the event on how the factor of lagom in Swedish culture and how that affects Swedish leadership. That it's interesting that you take up with emotions there, and also Monika with when you have a fika, that you kind of dive deeper into people's emotions and getting to know people more. That it is almost a part of Swedish culture. Lagom, for all the internationals who are joining us, is a Swedish word for it's not too much and not too little, it's just right. And it's in a very, very important part of everything in Swedish culture, that you shouldn't stand out too much. And also the concept of jantelagen, of also not boasting and not bragging about yourself. How does that affect leadership in Sweden? Also, when you have such an international team that you may have in hospitality, there's so many cultures to work with. Come on, anybody jump in here. Monika, go ahead.
Since I haven't worked in Sweden since quite a long time, I would be very interested to hear what Kerstin says about this, because lagom for me, yes, we have to do it in portions, but I don't see it as, yes, we don't brag about ourselves and we are humble. It's a word I like to use. I think the Swedish leadership model is very much based on humbleness. I'm going to say I, because I hope this is also the Swedish way, but I like to lift the people. Rather than talking about what I have achieved, we talk about what the team have achieved. Whereas leaders in hospitality that I work in, I see more GMs talk about their achievement. And I think Swedish leadership is about us. It's us as a team. We achieve something and we fail together and we rise up together and we lift what we do together. This is my impression, and I would be very curious to hear what Kerstin has to say about that.
Yes, this is really interesting. Maybe I will take some parts in Swedish because I can speak more from my heart. But being a manager, if when I own my own company, no one can threaten me. I can be the way I want to. No one can say anything about it. But if you are a manager in the middle segment, I think it's really tough in Sweden because you are employed to be a manager. Then you have this team. You have to be accepted by the team. Otherwise, there can be, if they don't accept you, even if you are the manager and you tell them we have to work like this for the company. It's this feeling, you can't touch it. But if you're not accepted as a manager, because maybe you are telling that you are a good manager, or you are taking decisions. In Sweden, I think it's easy you don't feel very well. I take this in Swedish. En mellanchef hamnar i en jättesvår situation. Är du självsäker? Är du tillräckligt självsäker? Är du en Zlatan i Sverige? Ingen kommer åt det. Då tycker alla att du är häftig. Men du måste gå så mycket. Du måste vara så självsäker så att ingen kommer åt det. Är du lite mittemellan? Du är mellanchef. Du gör ditt bästa. Om det finns någon i gruppen som inte riktigt tycker att du gör ditt bästa. Men ni vet, den är livsfarlig. Jag tror att det är därför så många mellanchefer går in i väggen. För ja. Yes, sorry.
Yes.
I can
just to briefly translate there. I think now we're talking about being a mellanchef is being a manager.
Middle manager.
Middle manager, yes. Direct translation there, perfect. And you brought up there we were talking as well backstage about Zlatan being such a Swedish personality and being known for being the best. I am the best, and totally not Swedish in a way. Of the Swedish Jantelag, and there should be a Swedish Zlatan-lag. But also Zlatan is somebody who proves himself. He scores the goals. He shows that he is the best football player. And I think that is it is something that it can be very difficult for a middle manager coming in as a new manager as well, to be accepted as a manager of a team. Whereas you, Kerstin, are the owner of the company. So how do you handle the team being an owner in the company? What differences do you see there, being a manager and owning your own company?
You're asking me, right? Yes. It's easy, to be honest, because no one can touch me, if you understand. If you are a hired manager, you have to do what you're paid for, so to say. But when you own things, they can't touch me. So that's the big difference. And I say this with love to people working as managers, because I know I've done this before. It's not easy. And I think it's with the law of Jante, with the lagom. I think in Sweden, it's really tough to be in the middle, to make everyone satisfied. And if someone don't like your decisions, they can be really hard. They won't tell you straight ahead, the straight way to the manager, but you can just feel it, and it's not good.
Sorry, I'm back again. Being a manager and owning the company, I mean, you're in the events industry, you've gone through a huge crisis and you've had to pivot your company very quickly. How has that felt for you, being an owner of the company?
Oh dear, I can't tell you. It has been, and it still is. I'm humble. Because I'm Swedish, and hopefully in November I will drink a lot of champagne and celebrating. We made it, we did it. But right now I'm positive, but there has been nights and days awful, because this is not when you own a business, it's not only about the business, because it's my family, it's my living, it's my last 20 years I'm risking and thinking of. And that's the, you know, many people have dreams of running their own company. It's nice when it's nice, but it's very, very lonely when you have to take decisions, or when you even might risk it all. And it's you, it's only you, no one else. But I like it. You have to do that, and it's kind of fun to fight as well. I'm that kind of person. I
like a challenge.
I like it.
Yeah. It's, I mean, obviously a situation that we are in at the moment, but it is extremely interesting to see how the industry will pivot and will return to this. Erik, what do you have to say now, being human connection specialist and focusing on more on growth mindset? We can talk a little bit about that, to pull leaders through an extremely tough situation right now.
Do you mind specify that question?
How can we use how can we use growth mindset to apply it in a time of crisis? Do we need to change our mindset from the typical Swedish mindset? Anybody else want to jump in?
It's not so, it's not so much about, I think there's a huge misconception today about this thing with mindset, that everybody's like, oh, mindset there, growth mindset this, and you have, your mind is part of your body, part of your life. And depending on how much awareness you can develop towards how your mind works and how that is fitting into you and your personality and where you want to go, you would be able to get there a little bit easier, a little bit faster, with a greater results. So I'm being asked quite a lot these days, like, okay, Erik, growth mindset. I'm being a little bit, okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's settle down a little bit and go into this thing of where do you want to go? What is it you are experiencing right now in your life? And I don't know, everybody that's here in this chat right now, you know, what is it that, what's the question you have on your mind these days? What are you asking yourself? What's the vision you have on where you want to go? Or is everything right now set to you're running one day after another, you're chasing your own tail, and your biggest dream is literally to make it? In that case, to answer your question, Marjorie, I would be, okay, I would like to recommend you to look and dream bigger. And right now we're living in a time that neither of us that are here right now have ever lived before. So dream a little bit. But to answer any like specific question, I need a more specific question to say, how can we develop a growth mindset? There are hundreds of different ways.
Exactly. I think also with hotels, like we have been on like a train on a track until COVID hit. And like you said, everything is so uncertain. So it is good to take that step back and look at what is it we want to actually achieve here. Monika, do you want to jump in there as a new general manager in a crisis?
I think the responsibility of the leadership when you have some employees digitally. I have people in my team that I still have not met. I've gone for physical walks with a few of them. People are working from home, which happens in all industries, including ours. And I think for us, as an industry, this is very new. I have always encouraged people to work from home when their life situation allows it and when the hotel industry supports it, which certain positions can, which is very hard if you're a bartender, but if you're a revenue manager, why not? So I think the industry is becoming maybe a little bit catching up with the rest of the world, other companies, especially the tech industry. They are so ahead of us in so many different ways. So I think from that perspective, the pandemic has opened up a lot of new possibilities in the hospitality. I think we are reviewing structures. I, for one, have taken over a hotel that had 36 managers 2 years ago, and now I'm down to 8 with a completely different structure, the knowledge, capacity, capabilities, something completely different that we need to build up almost from the beginning. And it's a fairly large house, so there is a very different way of operating. And I think this is a golden opportunity for us to review an industry that structure-wise have looked the same for 100, 150 years. In the research, when I wrote my book, I was studying the structure of hotels. They haven't changed. They looked exactly the same in the beginning of the 19th century, extremely hierarchic. Kerstin was talking about it before, how unhierarchic Swedish management style is. But the interesting part in hotels, we've kept that. We've kept that hierarchic structure. And I think now is a great opportunity to shake that up and say, do we really need to have that? Why can we not work more with self-managed employees, which will give them the opportunity to grow their mindset? Because they can work cross in different departments, but you don't necessarily always need to work upwards. Everything in a career ladder is not about taking one step up, taking one step up. Because the higher up you get, the fewer jobs there are. So does that mean I'm not going to get any further? I mean, I think working horizontally and develop yourself and use this opportunity to learn things across. We just hired quite a few people from the airline industry. It's wonderful to see these air stewardesses in the hotel. They keep their calm, they keep their way. I think we have a golden opportunity here. So I see so many positive things coming out of the struggles that we have. And very often that is the case. When we have to struggle, this is when we get an opportunity to come up with something new. And I see a lot of positive energy. At the same time, people are tired, and that has to be respected, and we have to take care of them. We have to make sure that people are not, as we say in Swedish, walk into the wall, because we have fewer people that has to do the same kind of job. So there is the balance here, but a lot of cool opportunities coming up now that I think really the opportunity is, like Erik said, think big dreams, look at what you want to do, and don't be afraid to think differently and raise those conversations.
I'd add something to that, because I agree with that completely, but just a word on communication as leaders in these COVID times and what we face with the way we communicate. There was a recent study in the US talking about the impact of Zoom group conversations on leadership discussions with staff. We are in a quite unnatural communication style with this. If you look at this panel that we have today, when you communicate as a middle manager, to Kerstin's point, in a hotel organization, typically communicate with a group of staff pre-COVID, you're communicating around process. You're communicating around the management of process, the management of the cleaning of a floor, or the setting up of a restaurant, or the fulfilling of a reservation cycle, or whatever it happens to be. And that communication isn't really face-to-face communication. You're communicating with groups of staff in quite a structured, ordered way, in a very similar way that communication has worked probably for 100 years in the hotel industry. I mean, not very much has changed in the hotel business for a long time. I think if I close my eyes, I could walk into almost any hotel room and tell you exactly where the bed is, exactly where the minibar is, exactly where the bathroom is, exactly where the plug socket is. It's all kept very much the same. But this world that we live in now is different, because we have managers now who are not used to communicating face to face with groups of staff, who are suddenly confronted by 10 faces looking back at them from a screen, and they're confronted with that all day long. And there's an unnatural element to this, because if you think about the size of somebody's head, in the screen looking at you, in your pre-COVID life, when you were confronted with that size of head, you were either going to kiss that person or punch them. You were certainly not going to stare at them and communicate about leadership, vision, and unity of purpose, and all the things that we have to do now. So the other thing that's happened here is that, for senior leaders, many of whom relied on personality-driven leadership styles, bluff, bluster, big speeches, grand statements, sweeping generalizations, and the way that they communicated about things. This platform also doesn't lend itself to that either. You know, you can stamp your feet and shout as much as you want. In the end, you're still a little box on a computer screen. So this also forces leaders to be more apparent in the way that they communicate. And it means that when you say you're going to do something, you actually have to do it. So it's also forced more accountability in a way on folks. So the opportunity out of this is that we can leave behind some of the, I use an industry term, some of the bullshit of leadership, and focus more on the actions and deliverables. The only thing we have to be very careful about, to Monika's point, is to keep our sense of inclusion. We can't leave anybody behind. Just because we have folks who may not be directly in front of us in the new hybrid worlds that we walk into in the future, we have to try as hard as we can to be as inclusive as possible to keep everybody with us. So unity of purpose, constant communication, actionable engagement, these are the things that will make you successful.
Can I jump in on the inclusion part there? Because I'm also seeing some questions in the chat coming in, and right there, like, Chris, beautiful transition into that. Right now, it's really, we are looking at a period of time where change happens so fast that it is overwhelming for most of us, right? Now it's just the fact to adapt to that idea of, okay, do I want to keep sticking to my plans, ideas, thoughts, feelings, beliefs that I had prior to COVID? Or is it time for me to revisit some of those thoughts, ideas, beliefs, feelings, so that I can, starting with myself, be part of this change? And second of all, lead those that are struggling a little bit more than others, perhaps. And you see, as human beings, say you're walking into, you're in a big crowd, and suddenly something happens in that moment. There's something that changes the dynamic. There will be, and by default, people will start looking for somebody to take the lead. And Chris, you mentioned this very, very nicely. Right now, there has been a significant change between, oh, I can talk about it, I'm looking good as a leader, and I'm looking really great. Right now, people are not looking for talkers anymore. They look for the people that can lead the way forward. And there, I see the questions in the chat, and one thing I really wanted to highlight was, it is time to drop the whole personal, professional. The more you try to separate the two lives that you have, apparently, you're not going to get further right now. I am Erik. What can I bring to my work? What can I bring to the people? If I'm separating myself, the people here are not going to get the genuine version of Erik. What is then going to happen to the trust level, to the engagement level, to the level of belief? Versus, okay, Erik today is feeling a little bad, perhaps, but you know what? He still shows up. And therefore, you see, that's why I'm going to trust Erik for. There are those who lead, and there are those in leadership positions. Those who lead, we follow because we want to. They inspire us with their values and with their vision. And there are those in leadership positions who we follow because we have to, because they influence us with their power. And the person who leads does not have to have an official leadership position. And that's what I think. I just want to share that as a reflection to some of the comments in the chat, and this thing of, where do you right now want to go?
Can I add something to that? Sorry, Chris, you go first.
I was just going to reflect back to Kerstin's middle management point to Erik, because I think there's a difference between having vision and unity of purpose, which I completely agree with you on, in a senior leadership position. I think if you're in a middle management position in a hotel, I think to a certain extent, you often feel like you're just there to manage process and manage other people in process. And it's finding that way to be a visionary leader as a middle management process leader is a slightly different topic, isn't it, than being a senior leader. And I think that's probably one of the challenges of this situation is how do we keep because we invest a lot of time and money in creating middle managers. We need folks in management positions to manage our businesses. Otherwise we can be as good leaders as we like. If we don't have our management teams, we're stuffed. So we invest a lot of time and money in that. And one of the things we've seen in this crisis is the huge talent drain out of travel and hospitality as a consequence of COVID. And that has predominantly come in the middle management areas and positions, which is where we've invested 10, 15 years of time and training into folks to create those people, and we're losing them out of the business because we can't hold them in this time. So, but it was just a reflection back on your topic, Erik. Sorry, Monika.
That's really, really good point there, Chris.
Can I just add something, Marjorie?
Yeah, go ahead, Monika, go on.
Can I just add something at one point to what Erik said and one point to what Chris was saying? I think it's very important that we do look at both the private and your work life. And yes, we are erasing the lines between the two. That is something to be cautious about, I believe. We've always said historically in hotels that you go on a stage when you arrive at work and you put on a smile. I think it's important that we allow people to have a bad day. I think one of the first speeches I did for a larger group of people quite a few years ago, I always talked about the stage that we have in hotels and how we can allow people to have a bad day. It's exceptionally important, but now as well, even when we had digital meetings, to allow people to have a bad day. Why force people to always have their camera on? If I don't want to show myself today, then please let me show a nice picture of me that you can enjoy, and I can sit here in my PJ because I'm not feeling well today. I think there we have to be, as leaders, a little bit more flexible. At the same time, as we have to appreciate that they are showing up and that we are doing it. But I think somehow there needs to be a distinction in between my private time and teaching people and caring for people as leaders to allow them to not always expect them to be online. When people are free, when people are on sick leave, when people have a free day, try to respect not to email people at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's really the basics that we've talked about for years and years and years and years that becomes even more obvious now when people are working from home. And then just to clarify to somebody who asked in the chat, Yasuradi didn't go from 36 employees to 8. They reduced the leadership when Corona came from 36 management to 8 leaders. The hotel has close to 200 employees. So we are one of the fortunate ones that are still running with a fairly good number of people here. And thank you so much. Sorry if that was long, Marjorie.
Thanks, Monika. We're going to take some questions now quickly. We've just run out of time here, but we'll get some questions from the audience there. Evelyn? Evelyn, you're on mute. So.
Technical fail. There was a lady called Meta who raised her hand earlier. I was wondering if Meta would like to ask the panel directly a question. If not, then one of the questions.
I can.
Oh, there she is.
Yes, I mean, sorry. Now, leadership and managing people. Actually, I also think it's very important to be aware of, managing yourself. We have so many thoughts going on, and one of the issues is also that we're not very often aware of what's going on in our heads, in our minds, and that we believe almost everything that goes on in there, and we try to make reality fit in. And then when we are so busy doing all that, when we meet our people, our customers, actually it's a little disturbing because we have something going on and it doesn't really fit in. So a very good point of you know, take a leap and try to change something is try to change yourself. Become more aware of what's going on. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who is observing your thoughts, and you don't need to go with everything that's going on in there. Meet reality as it is, reality. Don't try to fit it in. So I actually think that to become a good leader, become a good leader to yourself. Become aware of what's going on in your head, and don't believe everything you think. Maybe that was not really a question, but what the heck.
But here's my question, if that's okay to ask. If each of you could give yourself one takeaway from when you were younger, when you were in that mid-management position, what advice would you have given yourself as a takeaway for everyone here joining us, that perhaps they could think of to take with them after we finish up today? It's been fantastic. So Kerstin, what would you say would be your one piece of advice to myself,
to my younger self? Oh my God, Kerstin, you are worth so much more. You are worth 10 times more in everything, in salary and everything. Yes, that's my advice to myself.
And Erik, what would you say?
It's not about knowing, it's about trusting.
Okay, that's good. Very good. And Monika?
I would say be less hard on yourself, and it's okay not to know everything. It's okay to say you don't know. It's okay to ask for advice, but don't always take all the leaders' advice. Sometimes listen to your own gut and follow, because sometimes that is the better judgment.
Okay. And Chris?
Well, when I was younger, I used to wonder if people would find out that I didn't really know what I was talking about, and now I don't care. So I think that's possibly the best advice I can give, is don't worry so much, because in the end, it'll be okay. That's it.
Very valuable advice, definitely, especially for young people in the industry, that you don't have to know everything. Leadership is not about knowing everything. It's more about being curious and learning more instead. I think that's great, really great takeaway from today, guys. Thank you so much to everyone. That's our first RaizUp Sweden panel discussion. Our next event is going to be on the 18th of May, and
we'll be talking about social media.
And again, if you want to learn more, RaizUp. Sorry, Evelyn, go on.
You froze, sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
No. It will be about social media.
Social media.
Our next event is on the 18th of May. So please do join us then. And again, to learn more, do check out weRaiseUp.com. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. It's wonderful. Bye.